Here today with Bryson Martin. He is the owner of DVO and has always been a really, really solid dude to me in the industry. He's always taken care of me really well, even though I've never worked directly with DVO. They've always been a great help, and definitely has a lot of industry knowledge that I'm excited to learn about today.
I appreciate the kind words.
So, Bryson, first of all, maybe tell people kind of what your role is at DVO and what you do there, how you guys started the company, and kind of what your goal is for that company.
Well, my role is the owner and kind of managing everything, but I clean the bathrooms, wash dishes. I'm really good with a broom, yelling at the guys, "Come on, man, you're so messy. Come on, you got to keep them clean." But no, I kind of, I do everything. I mean, my expertise really is in the suspension field, so I'm still kind of heavily involved in design and working with the engineers and
like development of new product.
Yeah, developing it, laying out the product lines, project management, and we've got teams, we got guys doing all that, but I kind of have my hands in everything. But just the end product too. Going out from, I'm old and slow these days, but go out and riding, testing, and feeling it, and make sure that the bushings are feeling right, and the castings are straight, and the knobs turn nicely, and all the adjustments and regulations. So
cool.
It's when you own your own business, it's everything.
Yeah. You touch everything along the way.
Yeah. So I was educated as an economist, like way back when. So, business is always I love business, but I'd say most of my day-to-day stuff is just still getting my hands dirty.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy that part of it?
Oh, yeah. It gets sort of nerve-wracking. You're constantly, when you're testing, you got different pistons and shim sacks, and you're trying to keep everything organized, and you got 15 forks or shocks you got to test kind of in one day, and you're just pulling stuff off, and so that's kind of the, if anything negative, that's the rough part.
Just stressful.
You're just constantly testing, keeping track of everything. But yeah, no, besides being on an airplane all the time, that's probably the worst part of it is just testing stuff. So.
And how did you get started mountain biking? Did you start at a young age and just loved it, or was it something that you found later on?
Yeah, kind of. I've been riding a bicycle since I was a little kid, and always messing around. You got to think I'm kind of on the older end of things. So when we were kids, you got to, I remember my dad had this kind of welding torch. I think I got from him, and I got the Schwinn. I think it was welding for aluminum or something, and I'm trying to weld steel, and I'm just blowing crap up in my garage, and my dad's always yelling at me. But I always been, as a tinker, so I always rode bicycles, and we had BMX bikes back then, and we're jumping trash cans, and we're pretending we're Evel Knievel, and just jumping everything we can get our hands on. And then I got into motorcycles and motorcycle racing. And then probably, in the late, I think I got my first mountain bike in 1980.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, a long time ago.
That's sweet. Yeah. And then were you a racer at one point, too? Or do you?
Yeah. So, probably in the late 87, 86 or 87, I think I raced, pro. I raced expert and through. Went to all those early Norba races where, you just kind of show up.
Yeah.
And it was a Norba, and I remember, Joe Murray and Cindy Whitehead and all these guys would show up, and you go out and hammer for whatever, an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and then whoever finishes first, they're the winner.
That's
it
cool.
Was so you don't even know where the race is really. You just kind of follow each other.
And that was all mostly cross country still back then, right? Or
yeah.
The evolution of downhill coming out, or?
Yeah, so the first races were cross country, and then when Norba got really, when the sport started growing and got more organized and the sponsors came in, you had to do cross country, uphill, downhill, and trials.
Everything.
You had to do everything in a weekend. So your first, I think Saturday maybe or Friday was the uphill. So everybody races uphill, and then you get to the top of the uphill, and then when everyone's there, then you race downhill, and that's the downhill. So then you race back down. Yeah, you have one bike, right? And then I think later that day there's trials, so you had to do trials, and then you had your cross country, so you had to do all like 4 disciplines.
Crazy.
So I think and then when World Cups kind of started coming into the scene, so you remember the name Grundig World Cups? Like Grundig, they're a big sponsor. So Grundig, it's a big European German company. Mercedes came in, and that's when it really got big. So I raced a few World Cups. I think my best finish at the Kamikaze was like 16th or something.
Oh, sweet. For the downhill, basically.
Downhill, yeah. So that, I think at that point, then you could kind of specialize. You can race downhill. So that was, the days with Tomac and Philippe Paracas and Francois Gachet and all these, that's when Cedric Grossi was a kid, so way before those guys. So so I raced downhill and cross country and then I think in the God, I'm trying to remember, man, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, and when you were racing back then, were you someone that was always kind of had an eye on making the bike better, technical advantages and trying to get everything you could out of the bike?
Yeah, so I mean, before suspension, we used to tune the forks through tapering of the fork blades.
Okay.
So going from thicker to thinner and getting more flex and things like that. So that was really advanced. Oh, I'm going to go test this new rigid fork today.
Like an 18 mil stanchion, essentially.
yeah. It was. And then, so I was involved in a bike company, kind of part owner of this Brave Cycles.
Okay.
So, and we made bikes, and I think we did the first kind of production elevated chainstay, back then. So just, it was all rigid stuff. So, and then when suspension started coming into play was in the 80s, 88 or 89, because when I first did Marzocchi, that was 89. So that's when really suspension started taking off.
Yeah, and did you start the brand Marzocchi? Is that how that worked out?
Yeah, so I got involved. I knew of them through motocross, and I think I had a couple Marzocchi forks on some of my I had a Husky, and I think I had a BSA flat track bike or something with all had Marzocchi forks. So I saw these Marzocchi guys kind of walking around a trade show, and I was there with Brave Cycles, and I was like, Marzocchi. I go, what are you guys doing here? And in my head, I'm like, oh, they're kind of checking out the suspension scene and stuff. So I went and immediately talked to them, and I said, hey, I can do your suspension program here, if you need any help. And they're like, well, we haven't started yet, and we're looking at it. And so, long story short, we kept in touch, and then I went to Italy, and I was told Mr. Marzocchi, being just kind of young and arrogant, I'll make mountain bike suspension division bigger than motorcycle. And he's like, oh, he starts laughing at Italian. He's like, oh, I like your arrogance. Let's try to do something. He was just looking at me like, you're so stupid. What are you doing?
Was Marzocchi Moto a pretty big company at that time too?
Yeah, they were the Ferrari of the moto industry.
Really?
Yeah, they were huge. They have a long history since 1946 of making road racing forks, outdoor motocross. They had world championships. They were a really famous company in Italy.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, I worked with them in '89, and then just developed their whole mountain bike program. And I mean, the first 10 years, or just under 10 years with Marzocchi, they were, really, they're a proud company. They're Italian, and Italians are proud, and that's part of what's awesome about the culture. But they also wanted to do things their own way, and I'm like, no, mountain bike is really, it's not like moto.
Yeah, it's very unique.
Very unique. It's self-powered. The forces are different, and so it took them a while to understand that. We had to go through some ups and downs. And
even just the fact that the rider weighs more than the machine.
A couple times more.
Yeah, and it's crazy. On a moto, you can kind of set up general, a spring rate guide, stock spring rate can work for a wide variety of people because the bike is so heavy, but mountain bike, it's so specific.
Yeah, and you're only dealing with 2 inches of travel back then.
Yeah.
25 millimeter stanchion tubes. So, so I handled the whole program, was set up distribution in America, was sort of the importer in North America, but I also handled development and design And then, I think our Marzocchi heydays was when the Bomber came out.
Yeah, I remember that fork, believe it or
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
I'm old enough to have some. Yeah, ride around on those and aspire to those.
So, yeah, just, it was kind of perfect timing, the perfect storm. Like, I know RockShox had a lot of problems with Judy forks back then. Manitou kind of was coming on the scene. I think Answer had bought Manitou name, and they had some issues. And then I just came out with the Bomber. Back then it was like 4 inches of travel, 30 millimeter stanchion tubes.
Yeah, but that was revolutionary back then.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it was huge. Like, I had a big wig. I won't mention his name because it's kind of embarrassing for him. But he comes up to me from a current suspension company back in the day, and he comes up to me and goes, "Bryson, what you're doing is irresponsible. There's no way you can make a single crown fork with 4 inches of travel." I'm just looking at him like, well, we did, and it works really great, and it hasn't broke yet, so fuck off.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah, it was like, when I first did the drawings and the prototypes, like, we were kind of struggling with some of our current product line, and we think we had a recall with crowns breaking and things like that. And so I was like, no, I'm going to make this big beefy fork, and it's kind of really like for riding. It was that time, like, I spent a lot of time in Whistler riding, but it was like way before there wasn't a bike park, and we rode in Whistler, and we'd have to climb up, Whistler Mountain, and we just bomb back down on the fire roads and then hit different trails. And I was like, God, like, we need a big beefy fork for this kind of terrain. And so we first, I literally did drawings on my kitchen table, like hand sketches of the way I wanted the fork to look. And when I went to Italy, we made like sand casted samples. And
Really?
Yeah, it was, before molds and all that stuff. And
that's cool.
And
like,
so,
basically a sandcastle sample type thing?
Yeah, the mold is actually made from sand.
No way.
And it has like a wax chemical in it to kind of hold the shape. And then you shoot aluminum into it. And then you can get kind of this is like predates 3D printing.
Yeah.
But you can actually ride it for a little while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so... but I remember getting it and looking at it going, oh, shit, like, this thing's huge. And I remember Mr. Marzocchi going, like, well, it better be successful or you're fired. And I was just like, oh, man. Like, and we put it on the current, it was a hardtail, rigid frame, and we put it on. It was just like, it was so huge. The head tube, everything looked so small. So I just looked at it and going, oh, man, I'm going to get fired. So we took it out and rode it, and I was just like, wow, this thing rode amazing.
Yeah.
Like, there's something to it. Like, we're going to have to really push it. So actually I just, I was in a condo at the time. I mean, I just threw all this stuff into my 4Runner, and I was like, I'm going to Canada. Like, I'm going to visit Norco and Rocky Mountain and Kona, and like, it'll, should take off in Canada, where the riding's a lot more,
Yeah, progressive.
Yeah, and just more demanding up here. But it's funny, I stopped at Specialized on the way up because I knew a bunch of guys there. And I remember they've left the industry presently, but I showed it to him, and I remember he goes, Bryson, I really like you, man. You're a good friend. But he goes, You're from outer space if you think anyone's going to buy this thing. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you obviously don't get it, man. I'm going to Canada. So,
yeah.
I went from San Jose just straight up to Vancouver, and I got my first stop was at Norco with the guys, and a lot of guys are still there, like Jim Jameson and Peter Stay Smith and those guys. And we all went riding on a local trail, and they were like, oh, man, this is amazing. Like, yeah, we're putting it on our bikes. We'll put it on all our bikes. I was sitting there going, oh no, okay, we gotta get them in production. And then same response from Kona, same with Rocky Mountain.
Like all the companies that were a little bit more core, like rider owned.
Yeah,
they got it right away. It seems like.
Yeah, they got it. They definitely got it. Because they in turn they saw like how underperforming the current suspension was, even like the older Marzocchi stuff, but for sure RockShox, and Fox really wasn't on the scene at that time. And so yeah, I mean, in a year or two after that, we kind of freeride was, we were like, okay, we think free ride's going to be a big sport, so
Yeah.
we're pushing that up here. And sitting like with Grayson Baines, the old founder of Rocky, we're kind of sitting there one day and we're like, let's do this free ride thing and let's get riders together and call them fro riders and stuff like that. There's a little bit of a story in that story, but with Cannondale sending, like I was there one day when Cannondale sent a cease and desist letter to Rocky Mountain because they trademarked the word free ride.
No way.
Yeah, so we were all like I remember Grayson coming in going, look at that, Cannondale wants us to stop using the word free ride. And then I think one of us said, well, just call them fro riders and put afros on them. And that's how it all started. And then Rocky did this advertisement with actually the letter from Cannondale from, Mr. Montgomery, who's the owner, saying, we're really sorry. We've infringed on the word free ride. And we're going to stop using it, but we've changed it to fro riders. And it was like picture of like Tippy and Wade and Richie with like afros on. That's kind of how it all started.
That's kind of an embodiment of the whole movement too, right? Just just against the mainstream and kind of doing this whole counterculture thing that other people aren't really getting. Kind of similar to Marzocchi as a brand, like building suspension that people didn't know they needed yet.
Yeah. So I really took like a lot of the cues and the attitude, because I kind of grew up in Redondo Beach, which is next to Santa Monica, and I grew up during those Dogtown days of skateboarding, and so I hung out with all those hooligans when I was younger, and that was a really heavy influence on how I did Marzocchi and just how the whole free ride thing came about, because a lot of magazines were like, oh, free riders, they wear baggy shorts and they're tearing up the trails. Like they're going to get the sport, they're going to ruin the sport. And it's, I mean, I always remember just reading like these heavyweight publications back then, just going, these guys have no clue, like how big, I mean, this is going to happen. And there's going to be bike parks, and there's going to be, we're going to push the development of bikes through free ride. And a lot of magazines and publications in Southern California were so removed, like they'd never been to Canada to go riding.
Yeah, for sure.
So that caught them off guard.
And back in that time, were people mostly mountain biking, like kind of more cross country style, like just going out in the foothills and playing around and doing stuff like that? It wasn't really.
Yeah, they were like racing back then.
Trails?
No, they're all hiking trails.
Okay.
So we kind of invaded all hiking trails, and that's kind of like where e-biking is now. Like, it's
seems
funny.
Very parallel.
There's a exact parallel, because I remember like being in the hiking trails in the Santa Monicas in California, or Mount Wilson, which were a lot of hiking trails, and we started riding mountain bikes, and then you'd go to these meetings and public use meetings and trying to fight each other, and the hikers just hated the mountain bikers, and so we had to really try to protect the trails from closing. But there's that kind of feeling with the e-bikers too. That's a whole nother topic of discussion.
Going from Marzocchi, like introducing it, getting this bomber adopted, and then fast forward a few years and you have guys like Bender sending it on 12-inch travel things off 50-foot drop. Like,
it was so crazy. It was really cool, because mountain biking was huge. I think it was much larger than kind of it is now.
You think?
Yeah, it's hard. I was thinking about that yesterday. Like, like at Mammoth, at the Kamikaze, like GT had an 18-wheeler. Like guys were like there not guys, but companies were there with their teams with 18-wheelers. Like, I remember Max Comensal had this really amazing 18-wheeler, and the brand he started his first brand he started
was Sun, right?
Was Sun, Sun Chippy, and the Chippy were a huge jean company, clothing company out of France, and they were a big sponsor. So it was Sun Chippy, and that's when Ann Caro and Cedric and Nico and Francois Gachet and all those amazing French riders came on the scene.
Do you think that's because it was divided into less pieces of a pie? Like there's less companies involved and they had more market share? Do you think
that's possible? Yeah, because I mean GT was a massive company, like in Huntington Beach area. I remember going down there, just going, God, like, because they made everything down there, and I was just, They're a huge company. So yeah, the pie could be split up now. Like, Germany has like 600 brands.
Yeah.
In Germany alone, just 600 brands in Germany. So there's less brands in America now for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Yeah, it's hard to say.
I always think it's interesting.
I think it was bigger though.
It's interesting comparing it to like the moto industry in that sense, where there's maybe like 6 major players and then a few small ones. And in mountain biking, like I couldn't even, I can think of over 30 high-end brands that people would buy at any given day. And you're like, man, how is this functioning? But it's weird.
But it's definitely kind of, I mean, especially with e-bikes, they've reached another group of people that previously like weren't really so-called mountain bikers, that they weren't part of that pie that everyone's like taking slices out of. But yeah, I mean, RockShox back then, it was previously before it was owned by SRAM, but RockShox was a huge company, I mean, Marzocchi alone, we were doing almost 200 million in sales.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, we're pumping out, and I think in the course of a few years, we did, millions of forks in the market.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to today, even that's massive.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a lot of turnover. So, yeah, kind of sometimes I just sit there and go, I don't know if it's big or not, but it could be.
Yeah, it's weird. Do you think back then, was it also maybe a case of like not everyone had a mountain bike in their garage, and maybe like everyone's buying kind of a first or second bike, and then now it seems like no matter who you are, like your dad or your aunt or uncle might have a bike that you can ride here and then, but then like getting your full on like nice mountain bike is like a pretty big expense. But there's so many mountain bikes in the market, but I don't know.
Yeah, probably two demographics, because it was new back then, and a lot of people just jumped in and bought bikes, and they probably never really rode them.
Totally.
And then as mountain biking progressed, there's like there's a big barrier to actually going out and enjoying yourself on a mountain bike, because you got to be fit, and you got to have some skill, or you're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
So that kind of plays into it, and then just the changing demographic, like kids nowadays don't ride bikes.
Yeah.
And fortunately with the high school league, that's kind of changed things.
Yeah.
But prior to that, like kids, like sports programs were cut, especially in the States. There's no sports programs because of budgetary reasons. So kids just play video games.
Yeah.
Which sounds really weird, I've met kids that have never ridden a bicycle before.
Me too. I've met 13, 14-year-old kids that don't know how to ride down the street.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just kind of look at them like, wow, like what happened, because me growing up, like if you didn't ride a bike, you weren't cool. You're not gonna get a girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not cool. So but yeah, kids they skip the whole bike riding thing.
That's so so weird.
Yeah.
Well, going back to the freeride movement, I'm curious, what was it like working with those guys when they started pushing the limits and big freeride became a thing? Like, was it exciting from a product development standpoint, or was it stressful, or like?
All the above. I mean, it was really cool because, we would do like the 12 or 13 travel monster tee. Like we'd do stuff like that. I mean, if we were to do it now, I'd be like, man, how stupid is that? Like, what does that do? Like, what's that guy smoking? But like back then, we never really wanted to make it. I just made it, and I made it for Bender.
Yeah.
And like, I never expected to sell any. And then like the day after he was seen on it, we had like 500, 600, 700, orders for it.
That's
just
cool.
in the system. So I'm like, call Lily. I go, hey, we got to make this thing, and they're just going, oh, Bryson, it's very stupid.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I don't care. Like, people want them.
That's funny.
So we would make all kinds of crazy stuff.
Was that thing a modified moto fork, or was it a totally different casting and its own thing?
That Super Monster was its own casting, but how the Monster came about originally, I was walking behind the warehouse or the factory in Italy, and I was just kind of looking at molds and just because of fascination, like there's these big steel plates, and I was just like, okay, well, what molds is that from? And also like, I only had certain budgets to create new molds back then.
Yeah, because it's expensive to create a mold, right?
Yeah, it's very expensive. And so I was like looking at this one mold, and it was, just a fork leg at that time, so you need, you know, 2 legs, and then you put your arch on and stuff. It's much different than the way they're made now. I was looking at this mold going, oh, that's pretty big. I go, what diameter is that? And he goes, it's 40 millimeters. And I know, like, at the time, the engineers are starting to shake his head because he knows where this is going. And I'm like, can we make a mountain bike fork out of it? So we did some modifications to the mold, and basically it was a trials fork for, like, Gas or Bull Taco or something at the time. It was an old mold. So I'm like, all right, well, let's you know, I went and looked at the legs, and I'm like, 40 millimeters. I'm like, God, that's huge. I wonder if it's, you know, going to work. And so,
and that would be the outer diameter of the lower leg.
No, that was the stanchion tube. The outer diameter was much bigger.
Oh, wow.
So you always kind of gauge, like, what's the stanchion tube, because that's the hard part, is like you have to get a stanchion tube made, and they didn't have aluminum stanchion tubes back then, so we had to use a steel tube, which, can you imagine, the thing weighed like 20 pounds.
Yeah.
So you know, fast forward a few months, we made a monster tee, and it's steel stanchion, so it's like you couldn't even pick the front end of the bike up. So I was in Italy, and we were shuttling, and I hit the first jump, and I just skied this jump, and immediately my front end just like went, just like I was just going over the bars. And I remember I just hit the nose down and just leaned back really far, and I like saved it. And then I hit this other rock, and then I hit this other thing, and I'm like, oh man, this thing's a monster, you know? I was just crushing rocks with that thing, and I was like, all right, this thing's amazing. We're going to make it. I go, we got to get aluminum stanchions. So actually the first monsters we made had steel stanchions.
No way.
Yeah, it was so heavy. And then we got aluminum stanchions made and took like 10 pounds out of it. And then it just progressed to the super monster, which we never were supposed to produce.
Yeah, because that was
just
12
made it for
inches,
Bender.
right?
Yeah, I think it was 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is like absolutely ridiculous.
That's crazy.
So
that's so cool, though. It's cool that you're a part of that whole, I don't know, like you really helped kind of drive that movement in a sense, because if they didn't have that product, there's a lot of things they maybe wouldn't have been able to do.
Oh, yeah, it really drove the rest of the bicycle too, because when you're making forks, even the first Z1 was quite stiff. It was bigger, so I remember like I'd go to Norco or Kona and there'd be like head tubes snapped off frames.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because of the forces, you know. So, you know, they're just like, look what you're doing to our bikes. All the head tubes are snapping off, and I'm like, well, you know, you got to start chasing the weak points, and so they would just put gussets on everything. So
yeah,
that's how you solved it. It would just send the crack like down to the down tube.
Yeah.
So the head tubes weren't snapping off. But
funny.
yeah, that's just how you do it. Is you just start chasing things, you know.
Yeah.
So bikes progressed, rear suspension progressed, and you know, that's when you start looking at, you know, kinematics. Like, I mean, I don't know if you ever pedaled like an old freeride bike.
Yeah.
But they don't pedal.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob. I had like an old Banshee for a minute, like an old school Banshee morphine or something like that. Whatever the.
Yeah, there was no kinematics involved. There was like there's no concept of anti-squat, you know, or brake jack or anything like that. So
that's funny. And all this stuff back then was coil driven, right? Like coil sprung.
All coil.
Yeah, front and rear.
Yeah.
And then when did it start to make a shift towards air? Like, because Marzocchi had a pretty good air program for a little bit there, right?
Yeah, we actually we did air stuff, but back in that sort of heyday, Marzocchi is a motorcycle coil open bath kind of company. Like we struggled with air a lot. And then like actually the other guys, like I think Fox came out of the scene, and they had some really good designs with air. They had more expertise with air systems. But it's just the whole chase of, you know, dropping weight, making it lighter as possible. So
crazy.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, you and Marzocchi parted ways, right? Or how'd that come about?
Yeah, it was, well, this is the real story.
Okay.
So prior to the financial meltdown of 2008, just prior to that, Marzocchi bought a casting and forging company. and it was a big company. They had 200 plus employees, and we were trying to do more vertical integration of our castings for both mountain bike and motorcycle. So the casting company made like swing arms for Cagiva, like those big one-piece swing arms for road race bikes, crowns, clamps for triple crown motorcycles and mountain bikes. So we're trying to, theoretically, it's a good idea to get more vertically integrated, but back then I was like, no, like nobody knows anything about castings or forgings.
Yeah.
Like
in the company, Marzocchi.
In the company, yeah. And so they're like, well, we're buying another company. I go, well, what happens if the people are going to stay? It's a family-owned company, and I know Italians, like, they want to work for, if they work for the same person for 20 years and new management comes in and new ownership and everything changes, they might leave. And I remember because I was part of the board in the board meeting, and I remember just going, well, what if they leave? And they all looked at me, like Marzocchi guys looked at me like, they're not going to leave. Like, you're crazy. And I go, everyone's shifting to Taiwan for production, so we got to keep that open too. And I remember Mr. Marzocchi going, we'll never leave Italy, we produce in Italy kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, I don't own the company, but that's my 2 cents. And man, like 4 months after they bought the casting company, everybody quit.
No way.
So the owner was upset about something financially, and he left and pulled 20 of the engineers out and key guys, because casting's a science, man. You need to have like somebody with 10, 15 years of experience.
Like heat management and things like
that.
that.
Heat, exactly. Preheating the molds and just how hot the material is. And so they left. And I was just...
And you guys were screwed.
We were screwed. So all my engineers left Suspension to try to save the casting company. Because we had contracts with BMW and Ducati and stuff to supply swing arms and all that stuff on the moto side. So probably for 3 years, I had no engineering. And they were pulling money out of mountain bike to support the rest of the company, because mountain bike was quite profitable. So then my budget started getting cut. They're just like, well, we got to, we're going to save castings. So, just hang tight, and we can hang tight in the marketplace. And then the financial meltdown came in 2008.
Yeah, and then everything just shit the bed.
Yeah, everything shit the bed. Like, BMW stopped production, Yamaha, Honda, Cagiva, all the big Italian brands, Ducati got in financial trouble, and, Texas Pacific Group had to come in and buy them. But then none of those guys paid their bills. So,
yeah,
Marzocchi was in big trouble. And so I tried to buy Marzocchi, and then... my idea was at the time we had shifted we were making some stuff at Sun Tour, and I know the owners there are good friends of mine from way back when, and so I was like, I want to keep it alive. I made the brand, and so I said, let's try to buy it. And then another company, Tenneco, came in that now owns Olean's.
Yeah.
So Tenneco came in with a bunch of money and bought the whole group, motorcycle and mountain bike. And so that was an absolute shit show. Like, those guys were just, they sit around in the board meetings and talk about, what school did you go to? And I mean, I went to a prestigious business school too. They would all talk about it. And I'm like, I never even heard of the business school that you went to. Like, it was just, that's what they just talk about how big they're,
Yeah, dick measuring contest.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh, this is not going to work out good. So they wanted to fire me like right off the bat. Then they kind of found out what I did and what my involvement
How valuable
did.
you were too, probably.
Yeah, so it was, and I was, I don't really stay quiet in meetings. I just kind of say what I mean and do what I want. And so I just knew it wasn't going to work out, and then, Tenneco started getting in trouble financially with certain things that they were doing. And they did not want mountain bike. Like, they wanted the motorcycle part of it because they wanted to get it into transportation.
Yeah.
Scooters, motorcycles, and all that stuff. And then they put some of the directors they put involved in running Marzocchi they were just like, I don't even know how they got into, like, they were making
out to lunch. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were making like 7 figures and flying around in private jets, and, and
the company's fledgling.
Yeah. And they have no idea what they're doing. That's just corporate culture.
Yeah.
In big American companies. And so I tried buying it back and didn't work. So I just said one day I was just like, all right, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just started DVO. The next day.
I thought it was cool, like when you started DVO, and you can probably elaborate more on this, but like when you guys started, it almost started without product for a minute, and was kind of a brand.
We had T-shirts and water bottles.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just started marketing as, hey, we're gonna be something cool, and then I think you guys had maybe leaked a few teasers of the inverted downhill fork.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, this is coming. Like, check out our brand. This is rad. And it was just kind of cool to see how you guys kicked off the brand instead of coming to market with something ready to go and then trying to market the brand. It was like, let's build some awareness and then launch something cool and see how it goes.
And that's exactly what we did, and it's you perceived that perfectly. It's like what we wanted to do was, it was kind of unconventional, and I look at like I try to study other companies and I'm like, I don't think anybody's ever done this before. I wonder if it's going to work, but we know that we wanted to make sure, like, when the product came out, people already knew of the name.
Yeah.
So it's hard to, like, when you develop a fork, it takes a year and a half or so. And so, we didn't want to wait till the year and a half and wait till the fork came out and then try to promote the fork and the company name and the history. We didn't want that year and a half where people forgot about us. So that's where the water bottles and T-shirts came in. So, we just did a lot of marketing and just brand awareness. So in hopes that, like, when the product came out, like, psychologically people were like, oh, I know that brand, even though, like, we haven't, we never had
anything.
Yeah. So that was kind of the theory, and I think it worked.
I think it did too. I thought it was really cool because, like, you basically build excitement for something, and people were like, oh, dude, I want to try that when it comes out, and I don't know, it just seemed like a cool approach, and it almost. Was talking to you one day, and it was funny. You're like, when you were coming up with the name, you wanted something that was easy for the Asian culture to say.
Like
a drunk. DVO.
Yeah. So we were in Asia, and of course, the Asian dinners. The Asian dinners get out of hand really quick. Like there's a lot of kampai going on.
Yeah.
So if you can get a drunk Asian dude who doesn't speak English very well to be able to pronounce the name, I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
I think we got it.
Yeah, you're good. I thought that was super funny. Well, cool. Yeah, it seems like from that, DVO launching and becoming its own company with the downhill fork and starting to have some success there, and then you guys have kind of branched out into the trail bike market over the past few years too, and seen some good success there.
Yeah, so trail bike enduro, that's like 95% of our sales. Downhill is super small. We still sell, but like when we came out with the Emerald, the inverted fork, that was really just to show people what we can do. And it was pretty, and it still is. Like, at the booth there, I just had a couple customers who were like, I love my Emerald, I'll never get rid of it. Are you going to update it? Which we are. We're going to have some new updated version of it. But there's a small segment of the market that loves inverted fork. And we have the carbon fiber torsion arch that adds some torsional rigidity to it, but it does so in a progressive way. So the more it flexes, the stiffer it gets. So
it kind of like ramps up in a sense, like because you still want compliance. The whole thing with the inverted fork is compliance.
Yeah.
And wheel tracking on off-camera stuff. Like your wheel will kind of stay straight, and your handlebars can kind of move around a bit. And it seems. I mean, it's a cool fork to ride for sure, and super supple. And there's always oil on the seals. And
there's 400 grams of oil. That's almost a pound of oil in that fork. Yeah, that's a lot of oil.
That's insane.
Like, because today's products don't have much oil in them at all, because everyone wants a 1,800 gram fork.
Yeah.
So.
And the oil's heavy.
Oil's heavy. Yeah. There's people want light oil, but it doesn't happen. It's a specific weight to it, and that's it. But the enduro is a huge market for us.
When you started the company, did you have your eye on that already as well? Like you had a multi-step process of like, we're going to do this, this, and this, and then are you guys kind of where you thought you would be, or have things changed at all?
We have more products than we thought. Like because the market, when markets come into play, they start to get segmented. So like that's just a natural progression of any market. You have all these sub segments, and so certain products need to be this way and this way. So we've probably made like we have too many models. We're kind of like, oh man, what are we gonna do with all these models, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And so because like when we look at our sales, it's all like long travel enduro. But you know, and the whole thing, like when we first came out with the enduro fork, that was when the whole shift from 26 to 275.
Yeah.
And then it, you know, now it's 29.
Yeah.
And so, and then the different offsets of crowns. So all those are molds and projects. You can't just like.
And then Boost.
Boost was like, you know, Boost was cool, but man, it was really disruptive. Yeah. I remember, because SRAM kind of pulled a funny one on everybody because they pushed that really hard. It was only supposed to be for 29.
Well, and like for people that don't know, like how much does a mold cost? Like I mean,
100,000.
100,000
just to make it. That's not engineering time of the project and stuff. So it's like 9 months and $100,000 for a good mold. We get our molds done in Japan. That's the best molds.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then when they tell you, hey guys, we're gonna move the hub 5 mils out on each side, you're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. You can't just cut the arch and put some extra material in there.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
And you have all that invested mold costs that you're hoping to recoup on the back end with selling.
Usually you like to you know, we go, okay, we'll amortize a mold for 3 or 4 years, but when you have those changes like that, you know, and sometimes the big companies do that on purpose to throw the little guys off.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But yeah, no, I mean, we're you know, we had to chase that. So yeah, 26 to 275 and then to Boost and then 29 and then reduce offsets. So all those are projects and, you know, we just don't we don't just make something like, so, you know, RockShox or Fox is making this, we got to make it.
Yeah.
We spend our time, we develop it, we test it, we actually make sure, because we all ride, you know, we're all riders in the company. And, you know, when you look at the history of suspension and the history of bikes, like look how many like fad designs came out and they're gone.
Totally.
So, you know, that's my biggest pet peeve is like, there's so much crap out there and then the media jumps on it. They say it's the greatest
thing.
thing.
That for a second, kind of, where it was like the Bluto and all those products started coming out, the fat bike stuff. Like, well, what are we like?
Those things didn't even work.
Yeah,
you're
like, is this a?
It wasn't even
a movement or?
It wasn't even like designed properly for that kind of market. Like you got a huge tire, way more grip, contact patch is huge. So the forces on the fork are massive.
Crazy, because you have way more braking
and like
force.
What was a Bluto, like 30 millimeter stanchions or something? Like come on, like who made that project?
Yeah,
you know? That's like a 40 millimeter single crown project.
Totally.
Like, that's not.
That's what we're seeing kind of with e-bike right now too. Like, you know, I've been helping develop some e-bike product, and with the excess force, the excess weight from the motor and the battery, you have like that 15 to 20 pounds extra on the bike and kind of driving into the ground on the contact patch, and 2.8 tire. And like I've been having problems twisting crowns and twisting like stanchions basically.
Yeah.
And you know, I've been going up to 220 mil rotor size in the front and just getting extra
big
modulation.
4-piston brakes. And it's really getting close to like a 50-pound e-bike is you got crazy forces. Like forces are you know, I mean they're still geometric, but they almost feel like they're exponential versus a regular mountain bike because you have that force, like you said, you have that weight, and the weight is stuck to a bike.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys go, well, you know, it's similar to like just a heavier rider, but it's not because a heavier rider actually moves, and a rider's actually suspended off the bike through his legs and your arms. This weight is at
being
the bottom
driven
bracket
down the trail.
It's like driven into G out, so you can feel like the weight pushing through a G out. And so it puts crazy forces. We put some strain gauges on some bikes and some of our forks and went out, you know, I had my son Junior go out and just hit stuff and like crazy, like 10 G's of force.
Yeah. I feel it. I had to move up from a 35 mil stanchion platform to a 36 just because I kept having so many issues with forks. Yeah. And it wasn't anything wrong with the product design because it works awesome on a normal bike. It's just when you have a 50-pound bike going fast and riding at a pro level, like things are moving.
Yeah, like, the way you ride, I would put you on a dual crown, actually.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's crazy. I'm curious to see how the market will be driven. But I guess on that note, like, you know, I hear a lot of people now talking about electronic suspension and all this shit where it's like, How like what do you see the market doing, or what do you see the next big thing being? Like, are you guys kind of jumping on that train, or you have some other projects in mind?
Yeah, we have something else in mind. I think like electronic suspension. I mean, like what Fox did with the live valve and all that stuff, I think is really cool.
Yeah.
I haven't ridden it, but at Marzocchi we actually spent a long time working on electronic suspension because
for like sport bikes and stuff like that. Or?
Yeah, we had a lot of experience from motorcycles, and we're trying to do it with mountain bikes. And at the time, it was before e-bikes, and we had problems like you need a lot of energy to turn a valve and turn
and where are you going to mount a battery
actuators
and
all that stuff. Yeah, and so, but I just looked at some of the data reports on like the live valve, and I'm thinking like, it's cool, but like it's not something that I would do for sure.
Yeah.
And just the money involved in developing that stuff, and when you're working with electronics, in 6 months it's outdated. Like you'll need to do updates. How you got to update the system. You have to send an update to the algorithms, to the sensors and firmware. Yeah, like you do the hardware, and it's really expensive. And then you got the wires. If I did anything, it would definitely be Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Get rid of the wires, and so we're actually working on some stuff. The cool thing is, like, what we see with suspension is that the suspension works amazing if it's set up right. So we just want to do something where it helps the rider really achieve a perfect setup, but you have sensors that tell you that.
Yeah.
So where to go. And that way it's a lower cost to the consumer, and you don't have electronics that are going to break.
Totally.
And that you have to fix. And, like replacing sensors and replacing like a control unit, that's expensive. It's expensive to develop. It's expensive for the rider.
Yeah.
Bikes go cartwheeling down the hill. Like,
yeah, especially with the heat and all the oil and everything that the electronics be, pushed through. Cause
exactly.
Those forks get hot, especially rear shocks get super hot.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's still a little premature.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like electronics have to, you either develop sensors on your own or you buy like off the shelf, accelerometers, strain gauges and stuff. But how do you incorporate that? And then you got, how do you do your adjustments? And you got a motor and the motors burn out. Like, it's very complex for a bicycle. And you're riding in mud.
The gain is marginal. It seems like
it is marginal. Like, so you kind of got to look at it as that return on that investment really worth it.
Yeah.
When the stuff works so good, like mountain bikes suspension, and really from everybody these days, not just DVO. Fox and RockShox, they make really good stuff, and this stuff is way better than motorcycle suspension.
Yeah.
Like way more advanced than motocross suspension.
Totally.
So.
Because moto,
we're pretty advanced, man. The suspension these days are pretty amazing.
Especially with how small everything is, too.
Exactly.
Like you pull apart a motorcycle, fork. Like I rebuilt my forks on my moto, and like the amount of shims and the size of the piston and the amount of oil and everything.
A lot of shims, huh?
Yeah,
like
it's crazy.
40, 50 shims.
Yeah, and on a mountain bike, sometimes you see like 3 or 4 shims.
And you got your mid valves, you got your base valves.
Yeah, it's crazy that the mountain bike stuff holds up and works as well as it does, really.
We're working with some pretty advanced stuff in mountain bike.
That's cool.
Compared to other suspension. Now, I mean, there's motorsports where that's a totally different application, but yeah, when I look at side motorcycle forks, I just kind of giggle like, it's like so primitive. I mean, they work amazing. Like when a Works racing fork is, I don't know if you've ridden like a Works motorcycle suspension, but you can basically land on the face of jumps and not even really feel it.
Because high speed compression is
so
good. Controlled.
You got so much oil. You got bigger stanchion tubes, and it's stiffer. It's amazing.
That's cool.
It makes like a hack like me feel pretty good.
Well, sweet. And
awesome.
Yeah, I guess in closing, where do you guys see DVO in 5-10 years? Are you pretty happy with the trajectory of everything? And you guys seem pretty excited on the e-bike side.
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of e-bike kind of haters, and it's a really divided sort of emotion out there.
Yeah.
People I was riding up Whistler and on my e-bike, and I ride both. I'm still in shape. I do a lot of trail running, so I just like the feel of my e-bike, and because I ride motorcycles.
Yeah.
And it's kind of heavier. and I get better traction. And the suspension, the whole bike is more calm because of the weight. But, you know, when guys like, he was a friend of mine, he rides the park all the time. He's like, oh, so you're going to go cheating today, huh? And I'm just like, you take the chairlift up every day in the summer. And then I seen on Facebook, like, you're doing all these heli drops. Like, are you serious? I'm still pedaling to the top. So it's a really divided sort of, you know, feeling. But e-bikes they're blowing up.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to these big bike companies, man, and you sit with like 5 or 6 e-bike product managers, and there's one bike or one guy for just normal bike.
Yeah.
We call them antique bikes. Like,
Yeah.
And so, but that, like you said earlier, that takes a specific kind of product, and we're developing a bunch of stuff right now.
That's cool.
So
That's really cool.
yeah.
Well, sweet. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah,
It's
thank
fun
you.
talking to you. And yeah, for anyone that wants to check out your guys' stuff, DVOsuspension.com. And yeah, just keep making badass stuff.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, sweet. Thanks,
All
Bryson.
right, let's go for a ride. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll back then.
Yeah.
It was really like full on, like,
And like the bomber girl scene, and you had
Yeah.
like the whole like Bender and Wade Simmons and all these dudes just sending it. And
it was
Mountain
like,
bike.
you remember like the New World Disorder,
yeah, because
you know, movies and the parties, and it was
way different, it seems like.
it could never be done right now
Yeah.
because it's just with everything. It would like the parties
Everyone
that
would
they
be in
would
jail.
throw. Everybody would be in jail, yeah, for like sex or drug related problems or something. It was out of control. It was like, yeah, it was like motocross. It was
In
like
the 90s,
hardcore
yeah.
motocross. Yeah, it was like the freestyle motocross where it's like everyone was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna go do something, you know.
That's so cool. It's funny, like, I'm 27 and I grew up. I started like getting into mountain bikes a bit later, but I was watching those videos, like New World Disorder series, like all those movies, and
Yeah.
Back in the Saddle Again, and all this old stuff, and like looked up to those guys so much. And it's so different now to be a pro athlete than what they experienced then. Like,
Oh, yeah.
what I was
Yeah.
looking up to and aspiring to has shifted so much, and
Yeah.
now seems like to be a pro athlete now you have to be so specialized. In,
Yeah.
Like if you're a slopestyle guy, you're doing gymnastics training, you have an aerials coach, you have trampoline time, you have all this stuff, plus
Yeah.
riding your bike. And
Yeah,
for a
it's
racer,
not just like Bordeaux, you know, taking, you know, a hit and drinking whiskey and just go hucking himself. Yeah, like, yeah, it's total. I mean, that's the natural sort of life,
progression of anything,
progression of a sport, and it becomes very specialized. You know, like you look at any sport, it kind of did that. But yeah, there's something special to back then because. Yeah, you go and you have meetings at a strip club and yeah, with like and do like, you know, $5 million business deals with a bike company at a strip club, and then afterwards it's like
it's
a
this
full-on party and just mayhem, you know, and you're just like shaking your head going, yeah, I just made like $3 million today, and, and strippers all over me, you know, it's just crazy.
Do you have a favorite project that you ever worked on?
Yeah, I mean, all projects like were kind of crazy back then because like anything we kind of did, like
It was all revolutionary, huh?
Yeah, you put a Marzocchi sticker on a piece of dog shit, and it was just like, yeah, that's sick, you know. But like, you know, we had the Z1 and the rack fork that I did the first inverted carbon fiber upside down fork. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember that.
2000.
One. Really?
So yeah, I mean, like, fast forward, you look at that RS1, that RockShox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically it looked just like that. They just
like more cross country oriented.
Yeah, it was 120 mils of travel.
Crazy.
Magnesium dropouts, all carbon fiber uppers. So we did that. Yeah, I did so much. Like every 6 months I'd have something new.
That's cool.
And everybody would be like, yeah! We just sell like hundreds of thousands of units. Like just, I mean, our clothing sales, just our Marzocchi clothing sales was like $500,000 a year.
No way.
Yeah, gloves, t-shirts, hats, jerseys. I think we had some riding shorts and stuff like that. Shoes, we did like really the big first freeride shoe.
Yeah, because that was like stealth rubber stuff, or no?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Junior's hit me up. So yeah, like I mean, I think Intense did a shoe with 510, but just like they only did like 100 pairs or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we came out with the first freeride shoe, And so, like, you know, of course, all the free riders, Wade, Thomas, Vanderham, everybody had those shoes, and we did like we were selling like 20,000 pairs a year.
No way.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
So
our clothing
crazy.
sales were nuts.
Yeah, I have a actually in my garage right now. I have an inverted Monster tee, the whatever the inverted
The first shiver.
the
That was
shiver. Yeah, the shiver. I have one
Yeah.
of those in my garage right now. I'm gonna try to rebuild and restore.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so ahead of its time.
That fork feels it's so good.
Yeah.
There's people still riding it.
Yeah. Well, that's the
Yeah.
thing that I think is cool about the old Marzocchi product is that you didn't have to do maintenance on it. There's so
No.
much lubrication in there, so much oil that it was always good.
Yeah.
Like, it always felt good.
I have them in my garage that haven't been touched in 15 years, and they feel amazing.
Do you ever think that we'll see people? Do you ever think we'll see companies go heavier on stuff a bit and like try to get more durability out of it, or it's
I
not?
hope so.
Yeah, doesn't seem like
Because
consumers want it, huh?
It's hard. The people that are we still recording?
Yeah, just a
Yeah,
little bit.
okay.
We don't have to use any of it.
Yeah.
But
So the people that that are probably the reason why the weight thing still exists is like Pink Bike,
really,
the media. Yeah, because like they've always, and prior, it's not just Pink Bikes. Prior to that, it was Mountain Bike Action, all that stuff. They have these editors have this number in their head.
it has to be under X.
Yeah. But they don't know why.
Yeah.
Like they don't like suspension needs to be heavy because it absorbs energy.
Yeah.
So like if they knew like what a force was, force is energy. Energy generates heat. So that's how force is dissipated
Yeah.
through
Through
heat.
heat dissipation.
Yeah. So the most important things on a bike are your tires and your suspension. You can kind of have a shitty bike and you can have shitty other stuff, but your suspension, your tires need to be really good.
Yeah.
Suspension needs to be heavier. First of all, because it's if you have more weight of your suspension, it absorbs energy, and so it's more rigid. It's not going to break. It's going to last longer. You know, like the other guys who make stuff out there really light. You should probably rebuild your fork every month if you ride a lot,
Yeah.
because just this stuff flexes too much. Your shims flex. The oil, there's very little oil in there. But sometimes our stuff is a little heavier, and we're just like, oh man, we know like Pink Bike's gonna go, oh yeah, it's a fucking boat anchor, you know. But it's like you're just like, dude, you have no idea it rides so much better.
Yeah. Totally.
And once the media just says, oh, it's heavier than so and so,
Yeah.
then that's the thing that's in the consumer's mind is like, oh, well, it's DVO, but they're good, but they're heavier.
Because that was one of the knocks on the Emerald, right? The inverted one. At first,
Yeah.
people said it's heavy, but like you said, it has 400 grams of oil, so it probably works awesome.
People are still riding them, and they're 4 years old.
Yeah.
Like, just beating the hell out of them. So that, I mean, literally, that fork is like a bomber. Like it's gonna last. People will have it 10, 15 years from now and still be able to ride it, and it's gonna feel great
Yeah.
because there's a pound of oil in there.
Yeah, and like how often do you see a 2006 Fox 40?
No, not even like 2-year-old. And if you see it out there, it's gonna feel like ass.
Yeah,
And you can't rebuild it. You can't make it, feel better.
totally.
So, yeah, that's the thing that bugs me. Fortunately, with e-bikes, like I think we can have heavier,
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about as well.
heavier suspension.
I
Like, dude, shocks need to be 30-40% larger than they are now. You need more oil. You got one little damper doing the work of
Yeah.
two in front. Like shocks need to be big.
I think that that they should almost move away entirely from inline shocks. Like we need like double the oil volume on everything just
Yeah.
make it work better. But like there is that cross country crowd, but anything over 130 mil travel should have a reservoir on it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, you see companies like even like the Specialized Levo, which I have 2 of them. They're sold with an inline air shock.
yeah,
Like, dude, I blew that shock up in 2 days of
Yeah.
riding. Like that's irresponsible,
totally. And it's just to make the target weight of the bike on paper look lighter.
Yeah.
The overall bike build. Oh, it's 47 pounds versus
Yeah.
47.25.
Yeah.
But
You don't compromise like now you take the weight out of batteries and
Yeah.
the motor like they're doing now, but don't put an inline shock on there.
Totally.
Or companies put inline shocks because you can fit a water bottle. Like, that's asinine. Like,
Do you have
suspension
any?
is more important.
Do you have any thoughts on like linkage driven stuff? Do you have like good or bad? Do you? Have
I think with forks, like, there's some cool stuff out there.
Like that truss fork, you know, like seeing stuff like that.
Yeah, I know this guy that smacked one down and broke it, but sea otter.
Yeah.
But nah, that linkage driven is.
Do you think we would have seen it in other industries if it was going to be a big player? Like, would Moto have
Yeah.
adopted it, or
Moto's gone through a history of linkage driven stuff.
especially on sport bikes, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know, the thing is, some of the linkage driven stuff works well only in a really defined force input. And on mountain biking, you have all kinds of different inputs, from drops, high speed frequency, low speed, like, so it's the terrain that you encounter on a mountain bike is way too diverse than what some of the linkage driven stuff that's out there. It can't handle everything. And so, yeah, I mean, a telescoping fork, the way it is now, maybe isn't, it isn't 100%.
Yeah.
But it really
Like,
fits
it might
80%.
In that one force that the linkage driven fork excels in, it might not be up to that level, but in the other ways, it's so much better that it's better all around.
Yeah, from manufacturing and cost and ease of use, assembly, like a linkage driven fork, you got links, and all the links have to be really perfect, and you got more bearings, and then you got individual dampers, and then you got a funny rake to it, so it looks like you flat landed a chromoly fork and choppered it out. Like, yeah. So I mean, it's cool. It's cool to see that stuff come out.
Like, from an engineering standpoint, does that excite you a little? Like, it's just cool to see new stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'd be like a hypocrite if I'm sitting there saying like that stuff's weird. Like when at Marzocchi,
they're like, dude, you're
making
built a motocross fork for mountain bike.
Yeah.
Like,
so no, I like to see stuff, but it's like when magazines or media jumps on it and goes, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, it's like, come on, just review it with an open mind. And it's, you still, a linkage driven system, if you're to deliver 160 mil or 180 mil travel out of that thing, you'd have these huge links and the fork would be huge.
Yeah.
So, like, telescoping is really the only way to do it.
Yeah. Because for it to move that far, it's going to have a lot of things moving that far, not just one item, right?
Right.
Because the links are going to have to swing, and you have,
Yeah, you got to control, and you have added weight, so the complexities of that. And it only works, far as, I don't have a ton of experience with it, but it only kind of works, it's ideal for one type of force input. Mm-hmm. And it's, when you're riding here, you're on the flat. High frequency, 50 mile an hour kind of stuff, really slow technical stuff.
Yeah.
So you have a huge array of force inputs, different vectors. So
yeah, it's crazy.
But
I was just curious. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's always cool to see new stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't ever like kind of look at something new on suspension and go, oh, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Because I want to look at it, I want to check it out, and I think it's cool to have more competitors and more people in the market.
Sweet.
But, bike stuff that I see, like, sometimes shake my head, like, what the hell are they thinking?
Well, cool. Thanks for your time again. I don't want to keep you too long.
No worries, dude.
Sick.